Hey guys, welcome to another video. I received some feedback in my previous videos that some people were having a hard time seeing things, particularly in the dark environments and when they were watching on a phone screen. I think, what is happening here is as I'm recording this on OBS and then uploading it to YouTube, the picture is being darkened a little bit, even more than it already is, and then watching it on a Retina display or an OLED display, which excels at blacks, makes the image look even darker. So I have attempted to bump up the lighting a little bit in my scene, so hopefully you can see a little bit better. I played around with increasing the gamma of the image in post-processing, but that made it look really ugly. So instead I'm just trying to increase the lighting here in the game, so hopefully you can see things. But I'm still trying to keep things relatively close to the look and atmosphere that I'm going for, so things are still going to be dark, but hopefully you'll be able to see what I'm talking about. Let me know how this one looks. If I need to bump it up even more, keep the feedback coming. All right, so what I'm going to show you today are a couple of visual effects that I've been working on, some fog and dust effects, a couple of blueprints that I created, and then I'll kind of show you some of the world building things that I've added, or am in the progress of adding, because they are very much a work in progress. All right, so here at my little initial guard tower that you come across, I'll show you something I've added. So I've been working on this dust effect in the air here. Hopefully you can see that on the screen pretty good. Basically the vibe that I'm kind of going for with most of my interiors is that these places have long been abandoned and they're just kind of rotting away, and so they're just filled with dust and debris. So I added two things to achieve that here. There is the floating particles in the air, which is a Niagara system. Niagara is basically the system that Unreal uses for any sort of visual effect, like the fire, or these particles, or sparks, or any number of different things. And so I created this Niagara system to create these floating dust particles in the air. And then I actually, to create this haziness in the air, I actually watched a tutorial on how to create a localized fog using a material. And then I modified that a bit to give it this kind of dirty, hazy look for the interiors. So I will try to link the tutorial for that in the in the notes to this video, in case you're curious about that. But I think the addition of the dust and the haze in these interiors adds a lot of character. One thing I will kind of note here is the aura light, so the light that is just around the player at all times, that allows you just to see your immediate surroundings. That does not interact with the fog and the haze. So if you're just relying on that, it's still fairly a clear image. Only when you bust out your shield light, or when you light a torch or something like that, those lights interact with the haziness, so then it becomes visible. Alright, So to kind of show you the behind the scenes on that, so the haziness is controlled by this volume here. Essentially, this is, basically I go over here to shapes. I can drag in a cube. I'll make it nice and big. And so this this shape by default has just this white texture, and it has collision, so you can't, walk through it. But essentially what I can do is in the details over here under materials, I can say, I can choose this material that I created from watching that tutorial, change it to volumetric dust. Currently you can't see it because it doesn't really start to populate until you start running the simulation. But I can also go down here and find collision, say no collision, and then when I hit play on this bad boy, now I can run through this area, and if I have any sort of light that interacts with the volumetric scattering, then you can kind of see the haziness in the air. So it's pretty easy. And then essentially, what I would do is, shrink this to the size that I want, stick it overlapping with the house. And then that's giving me my haziness. And then for the particles in the air, this is just the Niagara system. This is probably very hard to see, especially because I can't control the camera. But it's kind of, as I have it selected, you'll see like these little yellow dots. This is showing you where all the particles are. So what that is, if I go, so this is my little Niagara system that I put together. And when you create these, there are actually a bunch of like presets that you start with, and then you can tweak them from there. So this one was essentially, if I say, create a new Niagara system, here's a bunch of different things that it can do. So we have bursts and fountains and gas explosions and all kinds of stuff. So I found one in here that is literally hanging particles, and then once I made that, I just kind of go in here to the particle, initialize the particle, and I can set, how long the particles last, the color, the size they should be. You can adjust everything like the aerodynamic drag, the wind force, all kinds of stuff. So, all right, so let me show you a couple of other things. So at this little second guard tower where there's the little watchtower on top of the hill, I have this building here, which is intended to be like a barracks for soldiers that are stationed at this place. Originally, I had a little wooden house here, but it didn't seem quite imposing enough for a military sort of installation, so I replaced it with this large stone structure, which I think is pretty sweet, and I'll show you a couple of things in here. Again, very dark in here, but I have, my hanging particles and my dustiness in the room, which I think looks nice and cool. And so this little fireplace here is a blueprint that I created. The cool thing about this is that the sconce that I have, this thing, the little braziers on the outside and the fireplace here are essentially all the same blueprint. I just make copies of it and then change the static mesh that is involved and which of the flame effects that I'm using. Essentially everything else works the same. The way it shows you the prompt to interact with it, the light, the sound effect, all that stuff works exactly the same. So that's been a pretty cool, easy way to create new sources here. So that's one thing. I'll show you something else. Here is another instance of my localized fog on the ground here. I think this adds a really cool ambience to this scene, so I'm pretty excited about that. So I'll probably be utilizing this in a lot of places just to make it look extra cool. But the main thing I wanted to show you over here is a blueprint that I've been playing with that is still a work in progress. So I'm just going to walk up to the windmill here and let you kind of experience the current state of what I'm working on. Alright, so you just witnessed my my lightning effect that I'm working on. So this thing is another blueprint that it has a Niagara system to play the effect of the lightning bolt, and this one actually includes like a little explosion of debris as well when it strikes. And then it includes a sound, which I got off of freesound.org of a lightning strike. I edited it down in Audacity to cut out the parts of the sound that I didn't want. And then I increased the volume of the initial strike just to make that initial thunderclap nice and loud. And then the part of it that I'm struggling with right now is the lighting. So I wanted it to, when the lightning strikes, I wanted the whole, world to light up like it would in reality. For a split second, when you see lightning at night, the whole world almost looks like daytime. So I wanted to have like an effect like that, but I haven't quite figured it out yet. I've tried using a directional light, which is essentially the same type of light as my world light. So the skylight here, the moon that's lighting up the entire world, that is a directional light. So I tried using another directional light so I can get that, illumination of the entire world. But it didn't quite look right. And I think it's also maybe kind of demanding on the system to just momentarily light the whole world with a new light, and it's got to create new shadows on everything. So then I also tried a more localized like point light, but that was hardly even noticeable because the point light is just so localized. It wasn't really making an impact, especially in a scenario like this where the bolt is striking kind of far away from you. So the lighting aspect of it is something I'm still working on. Oh, and I forgot I added another element to this, which is this spline here. So this is another Niagara element, which applies the effect along the spline. So this is after the lightning strikes and the sound plays, I initiate a flame effect on this spline so that it leaves behind like a little fire after the lightning strikes. So I'll play that again. Essentially what's happening is this big yellow sphere, this is my trigger, my collision mesh that is checking for when the player overlaps it. So the way I'm doing this right now is when the player walks into this zone, that's when it plays, and it will only do it once. So the idea there is I can move this collision sphere to wherever I want. So if I want, when the player walks into a specific spot to trigger the lightning strike, I can, control where that happens. For right now, I'm just making it a giant sphere around the center of the lightning strike. So we'll play that again. And now that you know what you're looking for, you can keep a closer eye on it. So I think that's pretty cool. I'll just need to keep working on the lighting. All right. So the last thing I'll show you for this video is some stuff that I'm playing around with. Very, very rough at the moment. But essentially, I decided that my world needed some water. So we'll fly over here real quick. So I created this essentially water system that starts as a waterfall from the top of this mountain near where the castle is. It's coming down the mountain, kind of creates a little pool here underneath this bridge. And then it continues down the mountain and ends up in the kind of flat area here in a little lake. We'll go take a look at that. So I also added a little fog above the water here. So the water system is something that's built into Unreal. There's rivers, lakes, oceans, and islands that you can essentially drag onto your landscape, and it will automatically deform the landscape around the water. And then you can essentially drag around splines to say where you want the boundaries of your water to be or the path of your river to be, and it will automatically adjust the landscape to that. It also kind of automatically does this visual effect when you're under the water. However, you can probably tell right now that there's no physics involved with this. I'm just walking around like normal, so I don't know if I'll necessarily add a swimming mechanic or if I'll just prevent the player from going in the water. Haven't really decided on that just yet, but if I do want them to swim, I'll need to come up with a system for that. Something that you may have noticed is this giant start of a walled-in city. So this lake here is actually in the location where I had my little village in the previous video. But when I was building this river and lake system, I wanted to try to make it realistic, and I wanted the water to kind of follow the the low levels or the little ravines and things in the mountains. So I kind of followed that down the mountain, kind of came through this little area. And then essentially, this part of the map where I had the village is the lowest, flattest part. So I was like, this is realistically like where this water would probably end up. So I got rid of the village and put this here. And then I also, on top of that, was thinking, the little village I had put together previously was something like 7 or 8 little buildings in a just kind of circled by wooden walls. It was kind of primitive. It was like a bunch of wooden shacks and things like that. But I figured I wanted actually to have, a city or a village that was a little more advanced than that. I didn't think it would make logical sense for, some society that has, awesome towers like this and the things that we kind of looked at earlier, but then their city just have wooden walls and roofs made out of hay. So I've been playing around with creating this little walled-in city. So far, basically, I tried to create the walls, and then I would just recently started playing with adding some buildings into the interior, but I'm not really sure what I want that to look like yet. But we will take a closer look at this. So these the archway here and the doors actually come from a different asset pack than the walls in the church here. But I thought this looked pretty cool, the giant archway with the massive doors. And I thought it was also kind of cool that the final castle here is just perfectly in the background when you walk through the door. I've been messing with trying to add this paved road here. You can see I'm still having problems with my grass coming through for some reason. I thought I had solved that, but for whatever reason my grass is still coming through even though I've managed to make the trees go away. So that's something I still need to look at. This church here came in an asset pack, and it's pretty epic, and it has a pretty huge interior here. And I'll probably just come out so you can actually see. It's got a nice big interior here, so I think I can make a really cool environment in there. I'm not sure if that's where the church will actually be located, but that's where I slapped it while I was messing around. And then these buildings down here, these came in the same asset pack as the church and the walls. And they look pretty good. However, they don't have doorways that you can just walk in. They do have a door on the texture, but you can't actually walk through there. So I'm not sure if I'll use these or not, or if I'll try out some other buildings that have interiors that you can just walk in and out of. However, one thing I can do is I've got this blueprint that I created for the ladder to teleport you from the bottom to the top of the ladder. But I can also just easily modify that blueprint to let me enter a building like this, assuming it has an actual interior. Some meshes on the inside, they're just invisible, so that wouldn't work for everything. But for these particular buildings, it could work. I'm not sure which direction I'll go with that, but that is an option for me. Yeah, I guess that's about all I have to share for this video. Hopefully you could see things a little better. Again, let me know if I should bump up the brightness even more, and I can do that. I appreciate you guys watching, checking these videos out. You know, the comments that you guys leave are very motivating for me to kind of continue working on this, and it's been on the forefront of my mind a lot lately. So I think that is a good thing, and I think making these videos has been a part of that and the response I'm getting. So thanks again for checking it out, and I'll see you in the next one.